lesson that is very essential if you want to speak or write accurate, correct English, especially when talking about possibilities and probabilities in the present, future, or in the past. Now, our lesson today is conditionals. Okay, so what are conditionals? If you already know conditionals, then you are going to know that there are many types of conditionals, and the main types are conditional 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now, this lesson will be very helpful to you in expressing yourself fluently and accurately in a very clear way in English to avoid being misunderstood. Being able to express these forms accurately in a clear way will help you to speak better English and to write better English. For that to happen, all you need to do is follow me along these 3 easy stages to fully understand each type of conditional, how we use it, which means the form, and when should we use each type. Well, to sum it up, at the end of this video, you will be able to, first, understand what are conditionals and what are their types. Second, how to use each type of conditional accurately, which means the form. And 3, when to use each conditional. Are you ready to learn conditionals? Let's start. Well, first, we need to understand what is a condition. Simply, a condition, very simply, is something that needs to happen for something else to happen, or for a situation or a state to be real. A model example for that will be, if this thing happens, that thing happens. So, this sentence that I've just said is a conditional sentence type 0. Okay? After in the video, we will get to know conditional type 0, but now I just want you to know what is a condition. So after we established the meaning of condition, I guess it will be easy to know what does a conditional sentence mean. Well, a conditional is a type of sentences that we use to express a condition and its result in the past, present, or future. The first type of conditional is called zero conditional. Now, as I said before, there are 4 main types of conditionals. Each one of them has a different form and a different use. Let's see how does each of these conditionals look. Conditional type 0 looks like this. If this thing happens, that thing happens. Conditional type 1, if this thing happens, that thing will happen. The same sentence in conditional type 2 will be, if this thing happened, that thing would happen. In conditional type 3, the sentence will become, if this thing had happened, that thing would have happened. All right, now I want you to pay attention to all of these sentences and try to see what is common between them, something that is repeated. Yes, you got it right. It's if. Okay, what's if? If is a conjunction, like but or and. These are conjunctions that join 2 sentences together. So, to join the 2 parts of a conditional sentence, we use if. The other thing that I want you to pay attention to is that in all of these conditional sentences, there are 2 parts. In each sentence, we have 2 parts. The first part is called the if clause because it starts with an if. The other part is called the result clause. Let's get started with conditional type 0 or the zero conditional. Now, this type of conditional is used to express a result that is always true. It is often used to talk about general truths and facts. This table here shows the two parts of conditional. In the zero conditional, the if clause or the condition clause is formed by putting an if plus a verb in the simple present. For example, if this thing happens, if you heat ice, if it rains. So the verbs happens, heat, and rains are in the present simple. For the main clause or the result clause, we use the verb in the simple present as well. So that thing happens. It melts. The grass gets wet. So happens, melts, gets are all conjugated in the present simple. Now, as you can see, it is pretty easy to form the conditional type 0 because you only use the simple present tense. You use it in the verb of the condition clause and in the verb of the result clause. Now, let's take a look at these examples. If you heat ice, it melts. If it rains, the grass gets wet. As you notice, these are facts that are always true. Because if you heat ice in the past, it melts. If you heat ice in the present, it melts. If you heat ice in the future, it melts. So, when the condition and result that we are talking about is always true, we use the zero conditional. As the other example shows, if it rains, the grass gets wet. Whenever it rains, whether in the past, present, or future, the grass gets wet. The time of the verb or the state or the action is not important because it is always true. Whenever the condition is true, the result will be true. So, if this thing happens, that thing happens. Let's go to conditional type 1. Well, we use conditional type 1 to refer to a possible condition in the present and its probable result in the future. Well, the table here is going to make it clear for you. For conditional type 1, in the if clause, we use if plus the simple present, and in the main clause or result clause, we use the simple future. So we can say, if this thing happens, that thing will happen. If you don't hurry, simple present, you will miss the train, simple future. If it rains today, simple present, you will get wet, simple future. Now, to understand the use, let's take a look at what each of these examples mean. Well, if you don't hurry, if you don't walk faster, you will miss the train. So if you don't hurry now, you will miss the train in the future. That's why we used the simple present in the if clause and the simple future for the result clause, because we are talking about a possibility in the present and its probable result in the future. So, if you don't hurry, that's the possibility in the present. It is possible that you don't hurry, and the result in the future will be you will miss the train. Let's look at the other example. If it rains today, you will get wet. Now, if it rains today, this is just a possibility, okay? It may happen and it may not happen, but it's a possibility. So it stays a possibility in the present. If it rains today, you will get wet. You will get wet is the probable result in the future. Okay? So this is conditional type 1. We use if plus simple present in the if clause, and in the result clause we use the simple future. If this thing happens, that thing will happen. Then we have the conditional type 2, which is used to talk about an imaginary situation in the present and its result. To express conditional type 2, we use if plus a verb in the simple past. And in the result clause, we use would plus a verb in the infinitive. Again, in the condition clause or if clause, we use if plus simple past. In the main clause, we use would plus the infinitive. An example of that will be, if this thing happened, that thing would happen. If you went to bed earlier, you would not be so tired. If it rained, the past, you would get wet. Now, we use that would to express or to show that we are imagining a situation or imagining a result. It's not actually real. So this conditional is about an imaginary, unreal situation in the present. That's why we use the simple past. So, in the if clause, in the first example here we have, if you went to bed earlier. We are talking about the present, of course. We are talking about an unreal situation in the present. But we didn't use the present because it is just imaginary. It's not real. It's in the present, but it's imaginary. That's why we use the simple past. For the result clause, we use would because it's in the future, but it is not real. It's just an imaginary result. So both the condition and the result are imaginary and unreal. So if it rained, you would get wet. This sentence means that it didn't rain and you are not wet, okay? It means that the reality is different. It's not raining and you are not wet. But if it rained, you would get wet. This is conditional type 2. If plus simple past plus would plus the infinitive. If this thing happened, that thing would happen. One thing to pay attention to here is that would can be shortened. We can use the short form of would, which is apostrophe D. So we can say, if it rained, you'd get wet. Or if it rained, we'd get wet. Now for the third conditional or conditional type 3, if I want to describe it in one simple word or expression, it would be the unreal past. Why did I say unreal past? Because the conditional type 3 is used to express a condition and a result both in the past and both are imaginary. So, table here shows you the form. So in the if clause, we use if plus past perfect. In the main clause or result, we use would plus have plus past participle of the verb. If this thing had happened, that thing would have happened. If you had studied harder, you would have passed the exam. If it had rained, you would have gotten wet. Now, basically, what we do in conditional type 3 is that we imagine that the past situation was different and therefore it led to a different result. So as you can see here in the first example, we have if you had studied harder. What does it mean? It means that in reality, you didn't study harder or you hadn't studied harder. So we make the hypothesis or the condition: if you had studied harder, what would have happened? You would have passed the exam in the past as well, because the condition and the result are both in the past, and they are both not real. They are both unreal and imaginary. If it had rained, you would have gotten wet. What does this mean? That it didn't rain and you didn't get wet. But if we want to imagine a different situation in the past, we use the conditional type 3 and we say, if it had rained, you would have gotten wet. So the condition is in the past and the result is also in the past, and they are both imaginary. All right, we are now done with the 4 conditionals. We looked at when to use each type and how to form each one of them. One very small thing to pay attention to is that when you change the position of the if clause and the result clause, the meaning of the sentence does not change. So let's say, for example, if I finish, I'll give you a call. So to change the position of the result clause and the if clause will not change the meaning of the sentence. We can say, I'll give you a call if I finish. These 2 sentences have the exact same meaning. This is applicable to all types of conditionals. Alright, now it's time to see if we can identify the 4 conditional types. Look at the following sentences, A, B, C, and D, and based on what we studied earlier about the tenses and the forms of each type of conditional, try to decide which type of conditional are each of these sentences. We will first read the sentences together, and after that, I want you to pause the video and try to decide which type of conditional is each of those sentences. Sentence A. If I had time, I would clean my room. B. If I have time, I usually clean my room. C. If I have enough time, I will clean my room. And D. If I had enough time, I would have cleaned my room. Now, pause the video, and based on the forms that we saw earlier, you can go back to the forms of each conditional. They will help you to decide what is the type of conditional in each of these sentences. Alright, so now you can check your answers. The 0 conditional is in sentence B, because we have the if clause has the simple present. If I have, and the result clause has also the simple present, I usually clean. For conditional type 1 is C, of course, because in the if clause we have the simple present, which is the verb I have, and the simple future in the result clause, I will clean. For conditional type 2, the correct sentence is A. If I had time, I would clean my room. Because the first verb in the if clause, we have the simple past. And in the second verb, which is the result clause, we have would plus the infinitive, I would clean. And finally, conditional type 3 is sentence D, because we have in the if clause the past perfect, which is had. The past perfect of the verb to have. And in the result clause, we have would plus have plus the past participle of the verb to clean, which is I would have cleaned. I hope you got them all right, and Mr. Ol here says, good job. If you got all the sentences right, you did a very good job. Congratulations. Finally, you can use this short quiz to check your ability to form the different types of conditionals. The sentence that you are going to work with is this. If Jake pays attention, he will understand. Now, this sentence, as you can see, is in conditional type 1 because the first verb in the if clause is in the simple present and the verb in the result clause is in the simple future. Now, your job is to come up with this same sentence in conditional type 0, 2, and 3. Now, just to remind you of the uses, conditional type 0 is always true. Conditional type 1, it is possible to happen in the future. For conditional type 2, it is very improbable or impossible situation. For conditional type 3, we know that it didn't happen. It's totally imaginary. Are you ready to check your answers? Well, the first one, conditional type 0, will be if Jake pays attention, he understands. So, simple present, simple present. It always happens. Conditional type 2, if Jake paid attention, he would understand. Simple past and would plus infinitive. And what we mean here by the sentence is that it is impossible that Jake understands. It's very improbable. Okay? It's an unreal situation. Conditional type 3, if Jake had paid attention, he would have understood. What we mean by that is that it didn't happen. We are just imagining a different past. So, the form is past perfect plus would plus have and the verb in the past participle, which is understood. Alright, now we've reached the end of our lesson and hopefully you are able to form conditionals, you are able to identify each type of conditional and to form every type of those 4 conditionals that we saw correctly and accurately depending on the situation and on the tense that you are talking about.